This is how it should be done. This is the Grit Sox Elite, which for all intents and purposes is a crew sock with a silicone element. However, it's been thought out and this is how you do it. Also, however, there is one problem because of that might put me off buying these Grit Socks and instead make me buy these. For price, these come in at about €20, which is kind of middle of the road for a grip sock of this style these days. Yes, it's not particularly cheap, but that is kind of where the market is, so €20. They do make the Pro Sock, which is these ones here, which are around €30, and I will tell you right now, I think the significantly better option. So if you're torn between the two, just immediately go out and buy these. I've actually already reviewed them, and I will link a video to this at the end of this one. Grips, as previously mentioned, are a silicone grip, but they are thin, they are low profile, which is definitely a benefit from those kind of big circular grips you get from, for example, Gain the Edge, which are also using more of a rubber element, which wears down, isn't particularly grippy, is very terrible in the wet. This, as a pure silicone element, is better and slightly better in the wet, if I'm being honest. Now, turn it over, we'll just do a quick test. They're very, very grippy. So if just pure grip is what you're looking for, I wouldn't have too many complaints here. I don't think there's anything particularly special about it. The grips don't go up the heel or anything like that. It just absolutely does the job you expect it to do by being grippy. There is no grip on the inside of the sock, which is exactly what you would want in this situation. You don't want that silicone outside element up against your foot. That's a recipe for disaster. So that is a smart thing to do, even if that does of course mean that your foot is going to move inside the sock a little bit. A sock with internal and external grips or some kind of all-around compression system is quite simply more effective, which leads us nicely to the fit. We may not have an all-around compression system here, but we do have a compression band that runs all the way around the sock, which I think is absolutely key. The amount of brands that stop it just on the top just doesn't make sense to me. So that is very nice for getting a good fit, and overall, because these do come in sizes as well, you're going to get a decent fit. Doesn't overstretch, but does stretch enough to give you a good fit, to minimize that internal movement with the sock. It's not mind-blowing. It's not as good as you're going to get from their other offering, for example, which does have the internal grips, but it's absolutely fine. The neck of the sock runs up high enough. This has a decent amount of stretch in it, while at the same time being good and compressive. This isn't going to overstretch. It's going to hold on to your leg, to your calf, and remain in place. And this little band at the top is nice and comfortable. This is actually more compressive and a little better, I think, than what you get on that more expensive sock. So that's a benefit as well. The heel is fairly standard. It's a single seam heel. Doesn't really generate much of a pocket there. It fits me all right, and having the different sizes makes a big difference, but it's nothing outstanding. It's completely fine though. Now we come on to my problem, the issue, the one thing that I don't like, and it's an odd one because it comes from the materials or the build of the sock, which is something that I do like. So this is a pretty thin sock, and I think that is generally positive for a performance sock, because so many brands these days are making a very thick, plush sock and just whacking grips on the bottom of it. They've not put any thought into how they're actually building that sock. They just want something that feels nice and comfortable out of the box. They're not thinking about performance, and this happens all too often. I do think performance has been considered here, and that has led to a better sweat wicking material blend and also a thinner sock through the footbed. But that is where some of the issue comes in. We do have quite a thin base to the sock, and this is something that I would normally really like. It's absolutely up my alley. However, if we turn this inside out in this area just up the front, you can see the grips running there. If you have a boot where you particularly need to find a bit of grip, you know, if you have a boot that doesn't have that amazing internal lockdown, you really want a pair of grip socks to kind of hold you in place. And then you start to move slightly, you don't have any internal grips to the socks. Your toes kind of search for the grip. They grip themselves, kind of pushing in to find the grip in the boot. And when you do that, when your foot really hits that toe of the boot and of the sock, you can actually feel these elements through the sock. Now, this is going to happen with a lot of silicone element socks, but it's definitely exacerbated in this sock because it does have such a thin footbed, which again, I like, but I just think the combination of a thin footbed and a silicone element, no matter how low profile it is, does mean that I can feel this a little bit more than I would like to, particularly in the toe area and occasionally in other places. So that is my criticism, my critical point where I'm like, that's the element that I don't particularly love. And it's one of the main reasons that I absolutely reach for these for their pro tier sock. This is the one to go and buy. You absolutely do not get that, and you still get that performance feel. These are actually a little bit thinner than that, and again, I should love that, but I feel like it's just a little bit too far and throws the balance off a little bit. But as I say, good materials, good sweat wicking, great ventilation through the top without losing a whole heap of structure. Pretty good. Just one key problem for me. Talking about the toes there, I should have probably mentioned this in the fit, but you do have a right and left labeled sock for an anatomical fit. And I will admit that on feet, and even if I put these out in hand, I don't really see much of an anatomical fit. I'm sure it's there and you can see it a little bit here as it tapers off slightly, but it's nothing too extreme. I don't think it's doing anything particularly impressive with that there, but it's nice that it's there nonetheless. And again, they're thinking about doing things from a performance point of view, not necessarily just here's a soft sock with some grip elements. So I appreciate that. So where do they rank? Generally, I'm very positive on these because I think there's a lot of work gone into it that doesn't go into a lot of socks that, even if they're built like this, aren't performing like this, and they definitely haven't tried. This does feel like a company generally across both tiers of sock that are really trying to put some work in to develop a great product. However, it is in essence just a good quality crew sock with a silicone element at a reasonable price for the current grip sock market. So for me, it goes in the middle tier. It goes into that Nike Crew tier, probably towards the upper end of it, and I can still recommend them. I still think it's worth checking out. However, for me, this is an easy choice. Got to pick these up. These are the ones that you've got to go for because they're just so much better. And yes, 10 euros more expensive, but absolutely worth it if you ask me. If you want to see my review of them, then you want to click on this video right here, and my 10 best grip socks right now as of about 6 months ago, click that video right there.